I call Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As Chairman of the Local Government and Environment Select Committee, it's a pleasure for me to be taking the last call in this first reading debate on the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Bill in the name of the Honourable Jerry Brownlee. I want to commence my contribution to this debate, Mr Speaker, by acknowledging the very measured and carefully considered contributions of members from across the House this afternoon in what someone earlier on mentioned may well be considered perhaps the most important piece of Christchurch legislation to be brought into this House in many a long year, and a piece of legislation, sir, that when the history of New Zealand and Canterbury is written in 100 years hence, the contribution that this House has made to the recovery and to the regeneration in Christchurch will be marked out by this piece of legislation. Sir, I'm not a Cantabrian, I don't come from Christchurch, but over the years I've had a lot of business relationships in Christchurch, and I've visited Canterbury on many occasions. I think I speak on behalf of all New Zealanders when I say that we who are not Cantabrians have been sharing, albeit from a distance, the pain, suffering and anguish that has occurred in Canterbury over these last 5 years. It's been a difficult testing time. It's been a time where we've moved from crisis and pain and disaster into now a regeneration period. And I want to just quote from the Minister's speech when he led off this debate. He said, "We're moving on from emergency and recovery to a time of regeneration. This is an exciting time. Much of the groundwork has been laid and many significant building projects, both public and private, are underway or have been completed, but there is still much to be done. Regeneration of a city and its people's well-being is a mission that can't be completed in a short number of years." And sir, I want to, as I say, pay tribute to the Minister for his contribution, not only in terms of political leadership of all that has occurred in Christchurch over the last 5 years, but in terms of his personal contribution. So this bill has been well received by most stakeholders. In fact, I can't think of any that have expressed concern about it at all. And I wanted to pay particular attention to some comments that were made by the Mayor of Christchurch City, the Honourable Leanne Dalziel, a former member of this House. And she said in the press of just 29 September, so only a short period of time ago when this bill was first being spoken about publicly, she said a new collaborative working environment the City Council and the Government have created through the Regenerate Christchurch is a game changer. And it is a game changer. She says, "I haven't felt so optimistic for the future of Christchurch than I do today," she said. Both, and then it goes on to say in this article, both Brownlee and Dalziel said that the new agency represented a unique partnership and offered a new way of thinking about how central and local government could cooperate in the future. Mayor Dalziel said, "To me, this creates an extraordinary opportunity for the city where the council and government can work hand in hand." Earlier on in this debate, sir, Dennis O'Rourke gave a dictionary definition of regenerate, and I too had done a little bit of checking to see what regenerate meant. His dictionary definition was slightly different, but the same theme. As a verb, regenerate has a dictionary definition that says to grow after loss or damage, to bring new and more vigorous life. And indeed, this bill attempts and will actually do that. And so I'm very confident that as a Parliament, it's not going to be beyond our wit to ensure that the dictionary definition of regenerate is actually manifested in terms of the legislative definition and the legislative outcome that will occur as the process of this bill coming through the Parliament occurs. And so, sir, I want to make a very strong commendation for this bill to the House, because it's becoming very obvious as we move through the process of the change and regeneration in Christchurch that the actions that are difficult to distinguish between the actions that have a recovery purpose and those that have a wider purpose. And so we now need to move and transition from that emergency response, that recovery response that took place in the initial stages and the SERA legislation that was set up to cope with that phase, now into this transitional phase. So this bill, sir, enables that regeneration and development, and it won't be constrained by a reference to the disasters that were the earthquakes or to building back to what we had before. It's a future-looking piece of legislation. It's a piece of legislation that will be one that encompasses growth, regeneration, new growth, and an exciting future for Canterbury and Cantabrians. Sir, I don't want to continue on about the process for the Select Committee, other than to say that I find it quite fascinating that on opposition benches they castigate the government for not moving quickly enough and yet want to slow down this piece of legislation. And I find that a very difficult juxtaposition to find. There will be absolutely every opportunity for Cantabrians and other New Zealanders to participate in the submission process. And as Chair, I'm going to make sure, as we always do in the Local Government Environment Committee, that all submitters get a good and fair hearing. And I encourage people to take part in the Select Committee process. It's a very important part of our democratic process, and it's a part that I think New Zealanders can have a real input in if they choose to do so. So my invitation as Chair of the Select Committee is for them to participate and to be involved in it. Sir, I commend this bill to the House. It's a good bill. I'm very much looking forward to, as Chair of the Select Committee, guiding it through the Select Committee phase. And once again, I commend the work and effort that the Honourable Jerry Brownlee has put into bringing this bill to the House with other stakeholders involved in Canterbury. I commend it to the House, sir.
Members, the question... Point of order. The Honourable Jerry
Mr. Speaker, this is somewhat unusual. I think we're about to vote on this bill. We had started the voting process, so I'm not interrupting it. But it would appear that there is widespread support for the bill, albeit that there have been a number of points that have been, I think, quite constructively made by parties that are outside of government. And I was going to therefore, sir, seek leave of the House to make a very, very brief response to some of those comments, given the fact that it is a bill being likely to get significant support, if not unanimous support.
Leave is put for that purpose. Is there any objection?
Mr. Speaker, the four things that I pick up